titled "The Best Games Are Kind of Bad," which is a very crazy take. You know what I mean? Like, if you think of all the best games in the world, right? God of War, Spider-Man, Doom, Legend of Zelda, right? The Last of Us. You wouldn't even consider those games to be bad. You know what I mean? Because of how they're structured and how they're made in comparison to other games. They're literally the top of the top. So I'm very curious to see what he has to say about the best games are kind of bad.
I'm going to start off by saying something that, judging by what I've seen on YouTube over the past year or so, is a pretty controversial opinion. That being, Tears of the Kingdom is a good video game. Great, even.
Never
Nintendo
played
took
it.
the open air concept they built Breath of the Wild around and expanded on it beautifully, offering a slew of new mechanics that all prioritize player freedom. I can't think of many titles where the moment-to-moment gameplay feels as fun for as long as it does here. There are just countless ways to engage with the world as well as the challenges it presents. With enough effort and iteration, any stupid idea you come up with can become the solution to whatever's in your way. I put in just over 100 hours, and aside from a small chunk of time where I was just standing on a dragon's back to farm materials, I can't think of many dull moments. Simply put, I loved playing it, as it offered hours and hours of compelling gameplay and jaw-dropping spectacle. So to now see video after video focusing on all of its shortcomings, showing disappointment at how it turned out, belittling something that provided me with one of the most enjoyable gaming experiences I can think of, well, it makes sense because I think a lot of them are right.
Oh, okay. That's very harrowing.
I've watched a ton of critiques on Tears of the Kingdom, and while I don't agree with every take about it because that's not how existing works, I do think the vast majority of criticisms levied towards it hold a lot of water. There is an annoying amount of repeated content, the sky islands are too sparse, there aren't enough unique encounters throughout the world, especially in the depths, the dungeons lack gravitas, and the reward for completing them is terrible as the companions' abilities are unreliable, and also having them out kind of tanks the frame rate. The major rewards in general are underwhelming as there aren't nearly enough things that feel unique. The Sage's cutscenes present the exact same information every time and don't progress your understanding of the world or story in any meaningful way. There's barely any narrative continuity between it and Breath of the Wild. The amount of menuing is out of control, and due to the flexibility of the mechanics, it's incredibly easy to trivialize most puzzles. Like Ultra Hand into Recall into Ascension clears over half the game. Pulling it off is fun the first few times, but when it becomes a solution to almost everything, the player no longer needs to really engage with what the game is putting out in front of them, and instead just has to execute a simple chain of commands. These are all things I feel about Tears of the Kingdom now, and honestly they were things I felt while playing, as I was having some of the most fun I've ever had with a game. It was a weird cognitive dissonance. I frequently found myself wishing it was better than it was and thinking about some of the ways it could have been, all while being regularly impressed by what it did have to offer. And this seems like a pretty common experience. Most praise of Tears of the Kingdom has always come with a caveat: an incredible game that annoyed me to no end, a disappointing masterpiece, a frustrating 10 out of 10. It's near impossible to talk about Tears of the Kingdom without talking about the ways in which it fell short. Now,
Okay, so I've never played Tears of the Kingdom. If anything, I've never played Breath of the Wild, to be completely honest with you. And what I will say is every game has its own gameplay loop that is centered around your enjoyment. Your enjoyment is predicated upon you enjoying that gameplay loop. With The Last of Us, you could argue that a lot of the gameplay loop is you following a linear path and progressing the story. You do some farming, you get some items, you kill a couple zombies, and you progress the story. That's pretty much the entire gameplay loop of The Last of Us broken down into like the simplest of form. In most fighting games, the gameplay loop, you pick a character, you learn said character, you take it online, you fight against other people. Gameplay loop. God of War, same linear gameplay loop. You progress through a linear stage, map, whatever, progress through the story, fight a boss, call it a day. It's literally the same thing. And so when you harp on games that have repetitiveness in them, I don't think from a story game, you should expect a multitude of like things to do, especially when the game is centered around like a story. You know what I mean? Like open world games, RPGs, MMOs, even they're susceptible to the repetition that comes with every game. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna have quests that are pretty much working the same way. They're gonna have abilities that work the same way as other abilities. They're gonna have bosses that work similarly or practically the same way as other bosses. They recycle this content so that they, you know, can have something to reuse for later, because it's a lot of work to come up with new stuff and to keep coming up with new stuff and make it like not only make it a good new thing, but to make it a rememberable new thing. After a while, it becomes like Fortnite. All the new things that Fortnite has introduced week after week after week have slowly become forgotten because they keep releasing things week after week after week. And they slowed down their content release to like what, 2 weeks to a month now, I think. I can't remember. But back when Fortnite was doing that week to week thing, I couldn't even tell you what happened in 2018, 2019. You could only remember really the big stuff. You don't remember all of the little new stuff that gets added because you keep piling on new things to try and keep it fresh. And I think that's one negative of trying to like implement newer things or things that try to divert or derive from the gameplay loop. You don't want to derive from the gameplay loop. You want to add on to it. So that's just my thoughts.
Now, it'd be easy to say that Nintendo should have simply fixed all the game's issues to make the perfect title. But the thing is, I think a large portion of its problems are a consequence of the thing that makes it so special: its immense scale. By scale, I don't just mean world size, even though that certainly is part of it, as Tears of the Kingdom more than doubles Breath of the Wild's total area. But I also mean scale in terms of abilities, activities, items, and the near countless ways all of these things can interact with each other. There is just so much to all of it. The possibilities of just Ultra Hand and the Zonai parts feel endless, and it only gets even wilder when taking into consideration the hundreds of materials that all have multiple purposes. The world.
Yo, Luhiro, thanks for the raid. Appreciate that, my boy. Hope you had a fire stream. Hope it was chill. Hope it was relaxing or exciting. Whatever vibes you go for. Thank you so much.
Is so densely packed with things to do and ways to do them, giving players constant opportunities to utilize the overwhelming amount of mechanics offered. The game is a behemoth, and its promise of possibility gives it a depth that few titles ever even have the potential to reach. But there are costs to this. There's a GDC talk I think about a lot by Alex Jaffe called Curse Problems in Game Design. The premise is that some design ideas have unsolvable problems that are a result of their core promises being in conflict with each other, and a lot of the issues in Tears of the Kingdom fall into that camp. Like with its freedom over mechanics, it wants to allow players to be tactical in combat and utilize Link's massive arsenal, but it also wants fights to feel fluid and frenetic and exciting. However, in order for the game to offer full freedom, the action has to be disrupted. So players are kind of forced to choose between fluid gameplay with more restrictions in what they can use, or more fractured gameplay with free reign over every potential option. At the end of the day, as it is a controller-based game, the way the mechanics are incorporated are limited by it. There really isn't a wasted button, but even then, in order to create all the interactions they wanted to have, menuing and contextual inputs were unavoidable. With the massive range of options the game gives, it also creates balance problems, as the devs want to give players endless ways to overcome any obstacle, but also want those obstacles to feel challenging. The problem is, not every puzzle can account for every solution, and some solutions will be inherently easier than others. This means for players to maintain a decent level of challenge, they'll have to limit themselves in what they use,
which isn't going to happen, because once a meta route is found in any game, a lot of people are going to flock to that meta route simply because that meta route makes your life easier. And whatever can make your life easier in a video game, most people are going to do it. Whether that be in fighting games where you find a button that's extremely good on a certain character. For instance, take, I don't know, Jin from Tekken, right? Electric Wind God Fist. Once you figure out how to do it, you're just going to keep doing it because, one, not many people know how to react to it. Two, it leads into combo. So when people figure out how to do the easy stuff, I mean, Electro Wing Godfist isn't easy by no means. It takes a little bit of time to learn it. But once you learn it, you've pretty much got the muscle memory mastered. And it doesn't take a lot or really a long time for any new player to pick up on how to use that move. You know what I mean? So it's like it's like once people find a meta option or an option that works or an option, they're gonna stick with it until the game forces them to learn something else. And if the game doesn't force you to learn something else, well then best believe your game is kind of one note, and a lot of people are not gonna like that.
Away some of the freedom. Doing this also requires some amount of self-control from the player, and that's kind of asking a lot, as sometimes it is hard to ignore the call of the simplest path, even when it isn't the most fun. Another example is that for Nintendo to fill the world with things to do around every corner, certain activities had to be reused. Given slight twists, of course, but still always similar to whatever came before. It could be argued that it didn't have to be this way, and that they could have taken more time in order to have every encounter feel entirely unique, but to achieve the scale and density they were going for, that would have required far more development time, which I don't think anyone wanted, as it would have kept us in anticipation for longer, ballooned the budget even further, and probably inched Nintendo even closer to charging $100 for it instead of the already increased $70.
Yeah, that's a really like powerful point to make. It's like if you want more content, better content, a variety of content from a game, then that means they have to put more resources, more time, and more management into said game. So as much as we consumers want, we also have to realize that these companies have to push out a lot of money just to do the things that we want. So it's like, and then there's cost for doing the things that we want as well too. Like for instance, GTA 5 is a massive game already. What we're expecting out of GTA 6, I'm not gonna be surprised if GTA 6 base is $100, because I believe that game is gonna be way bigger than any game we've ever seen in the last 20 years. Mind you, GTA 5 has been around since 2012, right? That is 10 whole years that we've been waiting for another GTA 6. And if we even assume they've been in development of GTA 6 for the last 9 years, or even last 8, 7, this game is about to be massive in every single way. We're going to be able to ride cars. We're going to be able to like really detail homes, detail characters. Like the world's going to be a lot bigger. There's so much more you can do. Buying planes, helicopters, armies, all of that shit is going to be a fragment of what you could do in GTA 6, because you can already do a lot of those things in GTA 5. And now imagine what they're really going to do. Like, holy, it's going to be crazy. And if people really don't expect that GTA 5 or GTA 6 is going to be $100 plus game, I feel like we shouldn't have asked for so much when it comes to GTA 6, because that's all Rockstar can keep doing at this point. Is there every time they make a GTA, they have to try to one up the GTA beforehand. Or you saw how big 4 was, and then 5 came out, and 5 blew 4 straight out the water. Now 6 is gonna come out, and 6 is gonna blow 5 straight out the water. And the crazy part is, they're not, I feel like, and this is me just personally, they're not gonna fuck up GTA 6. There's no way in hell. If they ruin GTA 6, Rockstar just goes under. Like, it's Rockstar just goes completely under, because everybody and their grandma included is gonna want to play GTA 6. And the massive kickback from a terrible GTA 6 launch would be astronomically bad for Rockstar and their stocks. They don't want that, and so they're going to put everything on making this game a success, and they're definitely going to price it to where they know it's a success.
Regardless, the promise of Tears of the Kingdom's design is that players will always have something to do on a moment-to-moment basis. However, this approach, while great for people who aren't focused on exploring everything but just want stuff to engage with regularly, can become wildly repetitive for those who want to see and do everything there is to do. And while I do believe that Nintendo did not design the game with the intent that players would engage with every last thing in it, if you create a finite collectible, people will be compelled to get them all. When it comes to cursed problems, developers either have to deal with the consequences or give up some element about it, shifting how it works in a way that doesn't yield as notable of an issue, which might not be a compromise they're willing to make. And of course, not all of these issues will affect players equally. The consequences will be far more severe to certain playstyles than others, so it falls on the developers to decide what they're willing to live with. Are they okay with making part of the player base be annoyed to let the other part have a great experience?
Yeah, that's a big thing when it comes to like anything dealing with like an esports scene, right? Any game that can and could have an esports scene has that problem when it comes to balancing. Like, do you balance these characters for pro level or do you balance these characters for casual level? It's a very fine line that a lot of games cannot really find the balance to. I feel like big examples are Overwatch and Marvel Rivals. You need to really figure out what you're balancing that game for. Are you balancing it for the casuals or are you balancing it for the pros? Because if you're balancing it for the pros, then a lot of your casual fan base is not going to enjoy it. And if you balance it for the casuals, your esports scene might be shit. So it's a really back and forth battle. And I don't think you're ever going to get it right. I think you should build your game for what you want to see. If you want casual people to just enjoy the game, build it for casuals. Maybe slightly adhere to what the pros say for certain things, or make the esports scene fit around the pros so that, you know, they can adjust accordingly. And it's not just, oh, I have to worry about the characters that I'm playing because they're broken or they're so strong, this, that, and the third. You have to actually like consider the environment. You have to consider the type of tournament it is or the type of play, whatever, this, that, and the third. So yeah, it's tough. It's a tough thing out there, man. I can't wait to be a game dev one day.
Problems like these exist with all kinds of games of all kinds of sizes, but they do seem almost inevitable for ones with massive scales. Frankly, they exist within all of the most beloved open world titles out there. The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring, Skyrim. All of them are considered to be some of the best games ever made, in large part due to their incredible worlds and the breadth of player options they offer. But like Tears of the Kingdom, their scales have a cost. Whether it be struggling to properly balance mid to late game encounters due to not being able to predict how powerful any given player character may be at any given point, or sacrificing player freedom in order to tell specific stories, or relying too heavily on the minimap to make it possible for players to navigate the world without it, or being Skyrim. At a point, once a certain scale is reached, there are just too many factors to account for, and that will lead to concessions in one form or another. To be clear, a game just being massive in scale does not make it good. In fact, I think a pretty common problem with many modern AAA titles is that they are too big. They try to do too many things to create the ultimate forever experience in the hopes of having the same impact that any of the massive games I just mentioned did, both in terms of sales and influence. But they tend to end up being too derivative or too stretched thin to have that impact. They lack the twists and polish that the best ones have, making these...
I'm so glad he's showing Assassin's Creed right here, because Assassin's Creed from Origins on up felt like it lacked a lot of that story, that really full immersive gameplay from like anything from Assassin's Creed Black Flag and before. I wouldn't say every game, but Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood 3 and 4, they all felt like it was a big like area. It was a big like game, period. It felt like it was so big, but in reality it wasn't. In every Assassin's Creed before 4, you were confined to a certain area, and you explored that area until you progressed the story, and then you unlock another area which seemed massive because there was so much content to do in said area. They confined you in a way that you didn't realize you were being confined. They confined you so that you could like explore more within that area. And then once you've done everything in that area, or even if you don't choose to do everything in that area, once you progress the story, then you unlock another part of that area that you didn't think you had access to. Now that you have access to it, you unlock more of that area, you unlock more missions, you unlock more collectibles, more story, more, like, you just unlock all of it. And that's what really drew me in about Assassin's Creed, is that there was something always around the corner in this confined little place.
Downsides of scale all the more noticeable. Now, even though big game does not equal good game, they do make up a large percentage of titles considered the best ever. Almost every top 100 list I've ever seen has The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, Elden Ring, Skyrim, and Breath of the Wild in the top 25. The drive to make large-scale games, while certainly influenced by the market, does go beyond that. There are just some things that only big games can accomplish. There has long been an obsession with making games that feel closer and closer to real life. This comes in a few different forms, with something like,
and I'm not a fan of
graphics being the easiest to spot at a glance, but I think the thing people looking for realism really want more than anything else are games that emulate the near infinite possibilities of real life, where the world and characters react and adapt meaningfully based on your actions. That doesn't necessarily mean photorealistic characters or one-to-one recreations of the world, but rather experiences where actions ripple out in a similar feeling way to how they do in reality, or at least seem to. Ones with a sort of realistic internal consistency with an overwhelming sense of scale. Titles like the ones that always appear near the top of the greatest of all time lists, as well as Tears of the Kingdom, touch the edges of that feeling. Their ambition comes at a cost, but they do offer an all-encompassing experience that very few games are able to. Tears of the Kingdom has been more divisive than any of the other games I've mentioned, and while this certainly isn't the only reason, I think part of that is because in some ways its scale is more ambitious than any of them. There are just so many more mechanics and interactions of mechanics that can create loose ends, leading to a higher amount of both positive outcomes and negative outcomes. I was talking to my friend Hot Cider about it, and he said it's kind of like baking a really big cake. Some parts will be great, but others will be underbaked, and your opinion on how good it is will come down to the slice you got. Tears of the Kingdom would have been a much cleaner game had it been smaller in scale, and that game is called Breath of the Wild, which also would have been much cleaner if it had been smaller in scale. But clearly Nintendo was willing to have their games be a bit messier in order to create experiences as open as these two. With titles like this, I find myself at a crossroads, because while there are undeniably issues with them, it is hard for me to care about them that much when the good stuff it does is just so special and frankly unprecedented.
I think that's what most bigger games tend to aim for anyway. Is like, does the pros outweigh the cons? And if they do, who cares about the cons? You enjoyed the video game, did you not? You're gonna come back and play it again, did you? Right? All right then. That's all we needed to hear. Give us our $70 and we'll go on to making our next game. Thank you.
When the slice I got was delicious. It doesn't erase or excuse the bad parts, but it makes them feel kind of worth it. I'm happy to take the trade-off to get the best pieces of the game, and even more so, hope that the aspects introduced with it are refined and iterated upon to eventually create something even better. I know some people will respond to all this by just saying I should admit Tears of the Kingdom is mid, and that it's okay to like mid games. And I do agree with that second part. I had a lot of fun with Halo Infinite's single-player campaign, despite it not knowing what kind of game it wanted to be. I feel an emotional attachment to Donkey Kong 64, even though it probably doesn't deserve it. And I put more hours into Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam than any person has any business doing. The way I feel about Tears of the Kingdom, though, is nothing like the way I feel about these games. Because I think those three are mediocre titles with some upsides, where Tears of the Kingdom is a great one with some downsides. Maybe it's semantics, but I do think there's a difference.
I think that's a big problem within not even the gaming community, but with just in life in general, or I guess maybe here in the United States. I don't know how it is for other countries or other continents for that matter. But I feel like everybody has forgotten that there is a middle ground to everything. You know what I mean? Like, there's good, there's bad, there's okay, there's great, there's shit, and then there's amazing. There isn't just a bad, okay, amazing. Shit, okay, amazing. That doesn't exist. There are middle like intermediate parts of that not spectrum, but of that bar. You know what I mean? Like if you call a game mid, but you enjoyed it, that game's not mid. That game's great. It's like a 6 or a 7. Hell, you could even go as far as say as an 8. A game that's mid is a 5. You know what I mean? If we're going by the 0 to 10, 0 being absolute shit and 10 being fucking legendary, then 5 and 6 is what you would consider mid. 7 and 8 is what you would consider great. 9 and 10 is what you would consider amazing. 0 and 1, shit. 2 and 3, bad. You know what I mean? 4, 5, 6, you can consider those okay games. You know what I mean?
Regardless, as those downsides undeniably exist, I do often find myself wondering, how do you properly judge it? How do you rate it? Like, review scores have always been a flawed practice. At best,
sure.
they are a quick and imperfect way to give a general impression about a title, but games like Tears of the Kingdom make them feel almost useless, especially when you try to compare its score to other games. For instance, A Short Hike, which is pretty much Breath of the Wild if it had a smaller scale, is what I would consider a perfect game. Every mechanic and activity builds towards a singular goal, leading to an experience where there never is a wasted moment. Its design is just so clean and pairs wonderfully with the game's story and presentation. Even at my most nitpicky, I can't think of anything I wish the game had done differently. Its execution is as close to flawless as a game can get. Over the years, I've played a handful of titles that I'd say fall into the same category. Iron Lung, Before Your Eyes, A Beginner's Guide. All of these games execute their core gameplay ideas in a near perfect fashion to create a tight player experience that seemingly directly matches the developer's intent. Now, the main thing all of these games have in common is that they're not much more than an hour long. The vast majority of players will finish them in a single sitting. They focus on small ideas and approach them from as many angles as possible to keep them fresh, but never expand them into something bigger. A Short Hike is a quote-unquote perfect open-world game because it is too small not to be. So if I were to rate it, as it has no noticeable flaws and is a delight to play the entire time, it should be a 10 out of 10, right? It sounds right, at least. But then you have something like Tears of the Kingdom, which has many noticeable flaws, but its scale and ambition blows A Short Hike out of the water. It has a much higher amount of interesting mechanics and moments, as you'd imagine it should, because Tears of the Kingdom had over 1,000 devs working on it, where A Short Hike largely had one. The things Tears of the Kingdom attempts and finds mixed success on are wildly inventive and groundbreaking, and will inform countless games for years to come. While no single hour of it may be as wistful as the one with A Short Hike, for me at least, the majority weren't terribly far off. So should Tears of the Kingdom get a lower score because it isn't as tight of a package, because it has design contradictions that get in the way of matching the developer's intended experience? Or should A Short Hike get a lower score because it doesn't aspire to the levels of ambition and innovation that Tears of the Kingdom does? Do you give a game more grace for trying more things, or do you cap one for trying less? Or do you give them both 10s because I like them? How do you properly score a game? And of course, the answer is there is no answer. There's no way to get everyone on the same page about what qualifies or disqualifies a game from certain accolades, or what a review score means or should mean. There's also no way to really capture what a game does with just a single number. With a video I mentioned earlier made by fellow IP intern Yako, titled Tears of the Kingdom is a frustrating 10 out of 10, I remember looking at the comments when it first came out and seeing one that said something along the lines of, "So you mean it's a 7? And it's bothered me for a year and a half. Because of course Yako didn't just mean accurate. It was a 7, otherwise he would have called it a 7. To Yako, like me, it was one of the best games he'd ever played, and it also had stuff he didn't like. Both things were true. I understand the compulsion to look at the average of a gaming experience. If a title feels like a 10 out of 10 at some points and a 4 out of 10 at others, you might want to call it a 7, and I'm sure some people would. Average it up. But for me at least, if the best parts of the game are really that spectacular, that is what I'll keep thinking about, as long as the bad bits aren't too distracting. The point is, everyone has...
Okay, but that's as long as the bad bits aren't too distracting. Not every game can adhere to that, oh, my amazing points were so amazing that the bad points don't matter. Like, if multiple people are like, this is a 10 out of 10, but a frustrating game, then it's not a 10 out of 10 anymore. It's somewhere, it's a lesser game, because a 10 out of 10 game does not frustrate you to no degree. You know what I mean? Or at least in the sense that whatever the game's mechanics or whatever the game's feel, story, whatever, all that shit, if it's not making you feel bad, then the game's doing amazing. Like if you're playing Elden Ring has been hailed as a 9, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, whatever you want to call it, right? That game frustrates a lot of people, but it doesn't frustrate people for the reasons that would bring its rating or score down. It frustrates people because it's a Souls game, you know what I mean? But like, I feel like it's a different story with this game. Like I said, I've never played Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, but from hearing and seeing a lot of people's review, it seems like this is an amazing game, but there are flaws. And it's okay to give an amazing game a lower rating because it didn't live up to that absolute peak that you wanted it to be.
A different standard by which they rate things by, and without the context of those standards, a number doesn't properly convey anything meaningful. Truly, it is useless if you don't know about the person assigning it and what went into their rating. This is why I find Metacritic scores, both critic reviews and user reviews, to be wildly unhelpful. You get out-of-context aggregates of out-of-context review numbers, and while I do enjoy seeing developers celebrate when their work gets high marks, it doesn't really tell an accurate story of how.
That's why I hate when IGN puts out reviews, because it's like, who is IGN getting to play these games? You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like they get one person to just play a slew of different types of video games, and that's a bad thing. Like, I feel like if you're gonna get a person, you should get 5 people, right? You should get maybe 10. I think 10 people, right? You get 10 people to play the game and not just one person. 5 people that actually play that genre and 5 people that don't play that genre. And out of those 10 people, if 8 of those people are like, yeah, this is a solid 7 out of 10, and the other 2 are like, yeah, I don't like it, it's a 3. Okay, cool. The game's averaging out to at least a 5. You know what I mean? A 5 or a 6. You know what I'm saying? What's up, Jay? Welcome to the stream. It's like,
how a game
I don't think you get
a platform that
a person who doesn't play the game to judge a game,
flawed and purely based
you know
on
what I mean?
Reviews is backlogged. It's pretty much letterboxed for games, allowing folks to track and review whatever they're playing. When you go to a game, it does still spit out an out-of-context aggregate score, but alongside that, it shows a chart of score distributions. And I think this information is super valuable when it comes to understanding a title. For example, Bayonetta is rated at about a 4 out of 5, at least as of recording this. And when you look at the scores, the most common by far is a 4, which checks out. That is what you'd kind of expect from a 4 out of 5 game. If you look at Rain World, on the other hand, it also has around a 4 out of 5. But the most common score by a good margin is a 5. It's just that far more people also rated it way lower. What this tells me is that Bayonetta is all around a solid game that most people would at the very least enjoy, but Rain World is a game that for some people will become one of their favorites ever made. It's just that for some others, it will be an immensely frustrating and annoying experience. While most beloved titles aren't quite as polarizing as Rain World, I do think many that become people's absolute favorites are ones that are very particular in who they are designed to appeal to. They are specific and unafraid to make choices
that game looks sick
for everyone. This is how Demon's Souls led to a modern dynasty. There certainly were plenty of players who despised the opaqueness and difficulty, but for those it clicked for, it felt revolutionary. These kinds of ultra-specific games that may not have widespread appeal but do have the potential for dedicated appeal are kind of what the indie scene is based around. Even though there is no single philosophy behind developing
that game looks
games,
so
many
sick.
seem to be created with the intent of making something that has been overlooked by the mainstream scene. Games whose potential profits wouldn't be able to support a massive team of developers can certainly still support a small team. And as game development has a lower barrier to entry than ever before, there are more games than ever before, and many of them appeal to very specific tastes. I think this is one of the reasons more and more.
This is exactly why I want to make games so bad. And specifically speaking, I want to make arena fighter games, because I feel like arena fighter games have such a good market, but there's only been a few number of games that have really capitalized on that market. And realistically, Jump Force has been my top 3D fighting or arena fighter, but it just flopped so hard, and I think that's due to the company's fault. But that's a whole different story. Xenoverse is another one. I think Xenoverse is the best arena fighter that has been released to date. There's another arena fighter on its way that might trump it, but we'll have to see. But for right now, I still think Xenoverse 2 is the best arena fighter, and I want to make an arena fighter one day that just shits on Xenoverse 2. That's how much I want to make that type of game, because Xenoverse 2 has given me so many good memories, so many bad memories, so many feelings. Like, just I just love that genre. The quick pace fighting, the multiple combos you can do, the multitude of characters you can learn. It's an amazing game. We're not even gonna get into the customization or the RPG elements of the game, but just the fighting in general is probably the most enjoyable fighting type of game I've ever played. There's never been a better fighting game than Xenoverse 2, for me at least. I'm not a typical 2D fighting game player. I like 3D games more. Like, I like 3D fighting games way more. And Arena Fighters just hit that mark. You know what I mean? Netcode, I agree. The netcode is bad. The netcode is horrendous. But if you're just playing offline, maybe with your homie or with a friend, it's an amazing game. It's so good. Like, if Xenoverse 2 were to come out back in '09, Tenkaichi 3 would not even be mentioned. I promise you. Tenkaichi 3 would be like Budokai. Like, people only the really, really older heads would really care about Tenkaichi 3, like how they feel with Budokai. You know what I mean? I feel like Xenoverse 2 is that good of a game. But it's just overshadowed by, the archetype and the genre that it is, and that it's not a quote unquote real fighting game. You know what I mean? But it's whatever.
Or players are feeling disconnected from AAA games. It's at a point where the budgets and, more consequently, the earnings demands from publishers and investors practically require every big game to be a hit. And this has led to many titles trying to appeal to the most amount of players possible, often making them too general and risk-averse to feel truly special. Now, as I've already pointed out, some big budget games, even ones that are aiming to appeal to the most amount of people possible, can be great and do well. So it's not as if AAA games for broad audiences can never work. Also, there are studios that have found success by taking risks, like Kojima Productions with Death Stranding and Remedy.
I've never played Death Stranding. I think that game, I don't know. I'm not really interested in that game. It just looks boring as hell. I'm not really interested in the story or the characters or the setting for that most. But I can imagine it is a really good game, and they definitely took a crazy risk with that. When I seen the trailer of just a guy carrying this big ass box on his back for the majority of the trailer, I was like, yeah, this game is gonna flop. Lo and behold, that game did great, and I think it was a contender for Game of the Year. So shout out to them. They came out with a 3 versus 3 mode that was better than just PvP. I mean, I think the whole entire team play thing was a good idea for Xenoverse. Don't get me wrong. But do I think 3v3 was better than just 1v1ing? Hell no. 3v3 was more fun than 1v1. I enjoyed the competitiveness of 1v1s over 3v3s any day of the week.
With Alan Wake 2, although with the latter, despite all of its good reviews and general fanfare, it still took over a year for it to become profitable. So while I think Remedy will keep taking calculated risks as is core to their ethos, it is hard to imagine tons of other AAA studios following in their footsteps. All that aside, the point is, now that we live in a world where there's easy access to experiences practically tailored for our personal tastes, it can make games that feel more general seem bland by comparison. Of course, plenty of games designed for a certain niche do still spread beyond it. And one thing I've noticed is that when they do break into the mainstream, there's a high likelihood that they receive the criticism of being overrated. And it makes sense. If a bunch of people say a game is incredible and you play it and don't connect with it in the slightest, it's easy to wonder what other people saw in it. This feeling only gets amplified by the amount of buzz a title has around it. Like, let's say some faceless YouTuber keeps telling you over and over again to play, I don't know, some game where you're in a time loop and fly a spaceship around a small solar system. And then you see see 10 more say you should play it, and then a bunch of your friends are saying it too. Like, you can't make a post asking what you should play next without having every other response be this time loop space game. But once you play it, you find the ship controls to be annoying, the time loop to be overly restrictive and repetitive, the story to be too text reliant, and you can't help but wonder how someone could view it as one of the most meaningful gaming experiences they've ever had. This paper bag guy says it changed his life, but you were bored and lost the whole time. So when there's that much of a gap between experiences, it's hard not to want to call it overrated. While I do understand why this happens, I think the terms underrated and overrated have some strange implications. Like, at its core, calling something overrated rarely has to do with its actual ratings or that an individual likes it. It's that too many people like it too much. It has less to do with the contents of a game and more to do with the person being tired of hearing about a game for the millionth time that they didn't find to be all that special.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel when it comes to like people in music. Like, when they say a song is overrated, they're not really saying it because they think the song is too good to be true. They're just tired of hearing people talking about it. And I think that is a big human failure, I guess. I mean, I don't think it's a failure, but I think it's just a drawback. You know what I mean? It's like the I guess I want to say it's jealousy. It feels like jealousy. It sounds like jealousy. It might be jealousy because all of these people are enjoying this thing that you are not enjoying. And so because you're not happy, you don't want them to be happy as well. You know what I mean? That's just how it feels. I guess maybe it's spite. I don't know. But I don't think I've ever called a game overrated, but I have called a lot of games underrated. You know what I mean? I don't think a game personally can be overrated. If you enjoy a game, enjoy the fuck out of that game. You know what I mean? And tell everybody about your enjoyment. You know what I mean? I like playing new shit. You got playing new shit. You know what I mean? Let's fucking play new shit together. You know what I mean? But when a game is amazing and doesn't get the attention it deserves, that's when I think you should call out the underrated portion of a game. If it's amazing and don't nobody know about it, you should start telling people. So, you know, not only can the maker enjoy the game, or I mean get paid from the game if they're like selling it, they can just, you know, give them some light. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying.
That they felt had fundamental flaws that led to them disliking it. Underrated also is never about scores. It's more so a stand-in for underplayed. So many times when I've asked for underrated games.
Oh, I played Kenya. Kenya was name me an underrated game. Kenya and the Spirits.
People respond.
This game right here, this game was amazing through and through. Like, I played this as like a freebie that came out for PS5 when it first dropped. This game was amazing. This is probably the game. I think this is the only game in the last like 9 years that I've played all the way through and finished the story. This game is amazing.
Have incredible reviews. It's just that their fan base is small and they don't get talked about that regularly in videos online. By and large, calling something underrated or overrated is a plea for people to care more about the things you care about instead of the things that already seem to have enough attention. And to be clear, that's not a judgment. I'm guilty of this too. It makes me fundamentally sad that in 2022, Stray won Indie Game of the Year over Tunic.
Yeah, I've never even played Stray. And maybe because I'm not in the community either, or I'm not really online like I should be. But Stray is just a fucking cat game. Why is it that a cat game beat out Neon White, Cult of the Lamb, and Sifu? I will never understand that.
And Neon White for that matter. And frankly, also Sifu. And you know what? Also Citizen Sleeper, which wasn't even nominated for the award, but that's a different crime Jeff Keighley has to answer for. I found Stray to be fine, and I've seen a lot of people talk about how it acted as a sort of gateway to get back into gaming or even into it for the first time, which I think is great. There's value in all types of games for all types of audiences, and we need
like this game does not look interesting
we need weird sweaty ones
at all.
However, I can't lie and say.
But I guess when you build games for casual, you know, groups of people, there's really nothing you could do. Sonic Frontiers didn't win Best Music, sadly. I mean, Sonic Frontiers had that one banger as far as I'm concerned. And then after that, I didn't really care about the soundtrack. But I'm pretty sure they had a lot more. So I probably got to listen to the album.
say that I don't wish games that did more interesting things, and yes, games that I really cherish, got the same kind of attention Stray did. Stray doesn't take a lot of risks. It's a simple, polished action-adventure game with a cute playable character. It's approachable, and in a lot of ways designed to appeal to a wide audience. As someone who is steeped in the side of the indie scene that offers weird and unique experiences, it's hard for me to look at Stray, which is touted by many as one of the best games in years, and not feel like it doesn't do all that much to actually deserve that praise. But of course, that's the point. What feels a bit stale to me is what makes it palatable to many others. It's what makes it easy to love and to recommend. I can spend all the time I want saying that games made to appeal to everyone appeal to no one, but that isn't really the case.
And what's crazy is there are more non-gamers in the world than there are gamers, if you really think about it. And to a non-gamer, a game like this is easily the best game they'll ever play, because they're not going to dive really into the gaming world. You know what I mean? Like, you've got your average gamer who probably plays COD, Fortnite, Apex, Valorant, CSGO, whatever. You know what I mean? And then you got your non-gamer who will never touch any of those games because they're too complicated, right? You'll see them touch Tetris. You'll see them touch mobile games. You'll see them touch, I don't know, Galaga. Games that are built for basic enjoyment, simplistic enjoyment. And so because there are more non-gamers in the world than are actual gamers, you're going to get games like this that just succeed stupidly well, because a lot of those non-gamers can just turn this game on for an hour and a half, if that, and call it a day. You know what I mean? It's just all it is. I tried playing Stray, but it was killing my graphics card. Damn, this game was that graphic intensive. Holy.
They just tend to appeal less to folks like me who play too many games. And to Stray's credit, while it may be designed to appeal to a wider audience, it still manages to feel like it has a personality separate from whatever was selling well when it first went into development. It may not be groundbreaking for me or the industry at large, but it certainly does enough to be groundbreaking for a bunch of people in its broad player base. We are a world of different audiences, and the aspects of a title that makes it special to one makes it overrated to another. To bring it back to where we started, I don't know that there is a series that has been called overrated more often than The Legend of Zelda. And Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have received that label more than any of the other titles within it. Frankly, it makes sense, as they are the best-selling Zelda games by a lot. Together, they've sold more copies than all of the other 3D games combined. They are talked about by more people, they are loved by more people, and so it is no real surprise that they are also hated by more people. Tears of the Kingdom especially is a weird game in that it does a decent bit to be palatable to an extremely wide audience, while also having a handful of systems with edges to them that will appeal greatly to some but annoy others. Ultimately, I get why people feel so negatively about Tears of the Kingdom. Instead of polishing and narrowing in on what Breath of the Wild established, it pulled things out, creating an ambitious yet messy game. The reality is, it could have been better. While I do think many of its issues were a trade-off of its scale, not all of them were, and there are some pretty simple solutions to some of its problems, which makes them even more frustrating. Like, they could have solved the majority of the game's narrative continuity issues with a handful of lines of dialogue, a side quest or two, and the reuse of a few Sheikah assets from Breath of the Wild. These things certainly would have taken some time, but they do feel like they could have easily fit into the development window. However, despite its flaws, both the avoidable ones and cursed ones, it also offered a level of player freedom within a structure that provided a clear sense of progression in a way I've never seen before, and getting to experience that was incredible. I think the phrase "nothing is perfect" often gets used as a way to hand-wave the issues with a thing. Like, obviously the statement is true, and is something I imagine we all recognize as true, but the way it gets used often washes away some of the nuance it contains. Because it's not just that nothing is perfect, it is that the aspects that make something good are also often the ones that make it kind of bad. Game design is a business of trade-offs, and while there are certain problems with elegant and perfect solutions, many others are cursed and will always have a cost. How you view that cost will come down to your taste or ability to overlook a flaw in exchange.
That's okay. I'm gonna let him
change
finish.
for an experience, but no matter what, it is still there. Whether it be that a game appeals to the widest audience possible by sticking to safe conventions, or is designed for a small niche of players that it will really hit for while actively antagonizing anyone outside of it, or is so massive in scope that despite providing some of the most innovative and intriguing gameplay out there, also contains unsolvable issues as a result of that, the best games will always be kinda bad. To someone at least.
See, that's a crazy take. You know what I mean? And I was really skeptical going into this video about how he would like connect all of this together. But when he said that every video game has a cost, that really made the most sense. If you and I'm in the prime example to this is Elden Ring. Elden Ring is an amazing game, but it is probably the worst game for people who do not enjoy Souls like games. Like if you've never played a Souls like game before and you decided to try Elden Ring, you were not getting past the first 5 minutes of Elden Ring without throwing your controller or wanting to break something. I promise you. Like as a new player to a Souls like game, you were gonna hate the first 5 minutes of Elden Ring. And if you got past those 5 minutes, that means you wanted to beat whatever was in front of you before you decided to quit. And that might be the reason you come back to the game, because you felt so accomplished after killing that thing. But if you don't kill that thing at all for the next 8 hours, 2 weeks, you're never going to want to play that game ever again or anything like it. And it's going to leave an absolute sour taste in your mouth for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? And that is what considers people a bad game. You know, or what people considers a bad game is like those moments right there. If you don't fuck with that game, or if that game is foreign to you and you try it and you can't get past something, or something's frustrating you to a high degree, you're not going to like it. And every good game does have its costs. Another good example is God of War. God of War is very story-based. It's not as actiony as it was in the past. Like God of War 1, 2, and 3, literally just action. Like if you had a percentage, it would be 70% action, 30% story. Now the God of War is really like 60% story, 40% action. You know what I mean? So you take what you want.
Even though it is easier than ever to find things that appeal to our unique tastes, whether it be games, films, or online videos, it still is pretty common for creatives to stick with safe ideas. These can still feel personalized to your interests and be great, but creatives are often limited by the platform their work is consumed on. This is something I see all the time with videos and personally experience. It is hard to justify making things that are weird or experimental or different from what any specific creator views as safe for their channel. But like, what if you want to see Jacob Geller make a lasagna recipe from Wanted Dead with his fiance, or watch me take a script I wrote 12 years ago, turn it into an actual video, and then provide commentary throughout it? These sorts of things are fun to make and watch, but normally don't get made because it's a bit too different. However, these two videos do exist, along with many others, because of Nebula. Nebula is a streaming service that I've been a part of.
Cat. I'm not gonna watch that. I think that's the end of the video. All right, that was the W video. Shout out to Razbuten. Oh, I'm subscribed to this guy too. I actually did not know that. Huh? Maybe there was something else of his that I watched that I didn't even realize. But yeah, this is a great video. This is an amazing video. It's very like thought provoking. You know what I mean? So shout out to this guy.